I woke up in a hospital bed to 43 missed calls. None from my husband. But his mistress? She was live on Instagram, laughing about how I collapsed at work, mocking me while wearing the diamond bracelet I helped him pick out for her. She had no idea that in 72 hours, I'd take everything. And I mean everything. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, if you've ever felt invisible in your own life, if you've ever wondered if you have the strength to walk away, stay with me. Because this story ends with a woman who was on the floor quite literally rising to take back her power. And I promise you, the revenge is so sweet you'll feel it in your soul. Hit that subscribe button right now, because by the end of this story, you're going to want to share it with every woman you know who needs to hear this. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. Welcome to Reality Stories Hub. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. You know that feeling when your whole world just stops? When everything you thought was real suddenly feels like a lie? That's where my story begins. And before we get into it, I just want to say thank you for being here. If this story touches your heart, please hit that subscribe button. You're going to want to see how this ends. My name is Sarah, and 3 months ago, I woke up in a hospital bed in Toronto with my phone buzzing like crazy. 43 missed calls. My heart jumped because I thought maybe, just maybe, my husband was finally worried about me. But when I looked at the screen, not a single call was from him. Not one. Instead, I had calls from my coworkers, from the hospital trying to reach my emergency contact, from my sister who lived 2 hours away. But James? Nothing. Complete silence from the man who promised to love me in sickness and in health. I'm 32 years old, and I worked as a marketing director for a big advertising agency downtown. Good salary, nice office, the kind of job that looked impressive on paper. James and I had been married for 5 years, and somewhere along the way, I stopped being his wife and started being just another person in his life. Like furniture. Always there, never really noticed. That morning started normal enough. I got up at 6, made breakfast that James didn't eat, watched him get ready for work without really seeing me. My husband owned a luxury car dealership empire. 3 locations across Ontario, selling vehicles that cost more than most people's houses. He wore designer suits and shook hands with wealthy clients and came home smelling like expensive cologne and other people's perfume. Big day today, he said that morning, barely glancing my way as he grabbed his keys. Don't wait up. I've got inventory meetings running late. That's all I got. No, how are you feeling? Or you look tired, or is everything okay? Just meetings running late. The same thing he'd been saying for months. I should have known something was wrong. But when you love someone, really love them, you make excuses. You tell yourself they're just stressed, just busy, just going through a tough time at work. You convince yourself that things will get better soon. So I said okay, told him to have a good day, and watched him drive away in one of those luxury cars he sold. The expensive kind that said, "I've made it," to everyone watching. Work was insane from the moment I walked in. We had a huge presentation that afternoon for a major client. Millions of dollars on the line. My team had been preparing for weeks, and I was leading the whole thing. Every executive in the company would be in that room watching me. But something felt off. All morning, I felt like I was moving through fog. My head was pounding, my vision kept going blurry, and there was this weird ringing in my ears that wouldn't stop. I kept drinking water, kept telling myself I just needed to push through. My colleague Rachel pulled me aside around lunchtime. "Sarah, you don't look good. Maybe you should go home." I waved her off. Told her I was fine. Told her I just needed coffee and food and I'd be okay. But I wasn't okay. I was so far from okay, and I didn't even know it yet. The presentation started at 2 o'clock. I stood at the front of that conference room with my laptop and my carefully prepared slides, talking about brand strategy and market demographics. I was halfway through explaining our social media campaign when the room started spinning. I remember grabbing the table, trying to steady myself. I remember someone asking if I needed to sit down. And then I remember the floor coming up fast and everything going dark. When I opened my eyes, I was staring at bright hospital lights. There was an N4 in my arm and machines beeping around me. A nurse came over, smiling that professional medical smile. "Welcome back," she said. "You fainted. We're running some tests." All I could think about was calling James. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. 43 missed calls, but none from the person who mattered most. I called him anyway. 3 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached James. Leave a message." That's when something inside me cracked. Just a little. Just enough to let the doubt start creeping in. Rachel showed up 20 minutes later, rushing through the curtain with worry all over her face. She hugged me tight and asked if I was okay, what the doctors said, if I needed anything. This woman I'd worked with for 2 years cared more about me in that moment than my own husband did. Then she hesitated. She pulled back and gave me this look. This awful, heavy look that said she knew something I didn't. "Sarah," she said slowly, "there's something you need to see." She pulled out her phone and showed me an Instagram video. And right there, in that hospital bed with an 4 in my arm, my whole world fell apart. The woman in the video was named Tiffany Ross. She was one of those social media influencers with perfect makeup and designer clothes, and a feed full of expensive restaurants and luxury vacations. I'd seen her account before, the way you see thousands of accounts when you're scrolling at night. But I'd never paid attention to her. Never had a reason to. Until now. In that video, Tiffany was sitting in some fancy restaurant, laughing with someone off camera. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. And her words cut through me like glass. "Y'all," she was saying, giggling into the camera. "I just heard the funniest thing. Some woman literally fainted at work today. Just collapsed during a meeting." She laughed again. That high, cruel sound that makes your stomach turn. Can you imagine being that pathetic? That desperate for attention? Like, girl, maybe if you actually took care of yourself, your man wouldn't need to look elsewhere. The comments were full of laughing emojis. People calling this unnamed woman weak, saying she probably deserved whatever she got. And Tiffany just kept going, kept laughing, kept making little comments that felt like they were aimed directly at me. Then she held up her wrist, showing off this beautiful diamond bracelet. Meanwhile, some of us are being treated like queens. When you know how to keep a man interested, he shows his appreciation. My blood turned to ice. I recognized that bracelet. James had bought one exactly like it 4 months ago. He told me it was a gift for a business client. A female client who'd just bought 3 luxury vehicles from him. I'd even gone with him to the jewelry store, helped him pick out the design. And now here it was on this woman's wrist, while she mocked someone who sounded exactly like me for collapsing at work. Rachel was watching my face. I could tell she'd already figured it out. "Sarah," she said softly, but I couldn't hear her over the rushing sound in my ears. All those late nights at work. All those business trips. All those times he'd pulled away when I tried to touch him. Said he was tired, said he had a headache, said we'd reconnect soon. Soon never came because he was already connected to someone else. The doctor came in after Rachel left to give me some space. She said I had severe anemia, dehydration, and exhaustion from chronic stress. She wanted to keep me overnight, run more tests in the morning. But I couldn't stay there. I needed to go home. I needed to find the truth, even though part of me already knew what I'd find. I signed myself out against the doctor's advice, called a taxi, and went back to our house in the suburbs. The house we'd bought together 3 years ago. The house that was supposed to be our forever home. James's laptop was right where he always left it, on the desk in his home office. The man owned $1 million car dealership business, and he couldn't remember to log out of his email. I sat in his chair and started reading. Every email, every message, every piece of evidence he'd been too careless or too arrogant to hide. 7 months. He'd been seeing Tiffany for 7 months. Since last spring, when he told me he needed to focus on expanding the business and didn't have time for date nights anymore. There were hotel receipts, restaurant bills from places I'd suggested we try together, but he'd said were too expensive. Messages calling her baby and my love and the one I've been waiting for. The same words he used to say to me, back when he still looked at me like I mattered. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was buried in a folder labeled Tax Documents 2024. Financial records that showed James had been moving money. Lots of money. Transferring it to accounts I didn't know existed. Setting up companies in other provinces under different names. And then I found the email to his lawyer from 2 weeks ago. The one that spelled out his entire plan. He was going to divorce me. Claim the business was struggling. Hide as much money as possible. Leave me with almost nothing. There was even a timeline. He was planning to serve me papers next month, right after our anniversary. I sat in that chair as the sun went down and the room got dark. Just reading and rereading those emails. Saving screenshots. Forwarding everything to my personal email. And somewhere in the middle of all that pain, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, burning in my chest like fire. But underneath it, something else was growing. something cold and clear and absolutely done with being treated like I didn't matter. I called my old friend Victoria at 10 o'clock that night. We'd been roommates in university, stayed close ever since. She was also one of the best divorce lawyers in Toronto, specializing in cases where one spouse tried to hide assets. When she answered, probably expecting a friendly chat, I said 4 words. I need your help. She was at my house within an hour. We sat at my kitchen table, the one James and I had picked out together when we moved in. And I showed her everything. Every email, every bank statement, every piece of evidence I'd found. Victoria's face got harder with each page she read. When I finished, she looked at me with fire in her eyes. Sarah, she said, he really thinks he's going to get away with this. He thinks you're just going to accept it and walk away quietly. Then she smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. But here's what he doesn't know. You co-signed on his first dealership location, the one he used to secure loans for the other 2. That means you legally own half of the foundation his entire business is built on. She pulled out her laptop and started typing. We can freeze accounts. We can file claims on properties. We can make this man's life very, very complicated. Over the next 4 days, I became someone I didn't recognize. On the outside, I was the same Sarah. Going to work, coming home, asking James about his day when he bothered to show up. Smiling when I needed to. Acting normal. But underneath, I was building something. A case that would tear apart everything he thought he'd built behind my back. Victoria brought in a private investigator and a financial expert who specialized in finding hidden money. The investigator came back with information that almost made me laugh, except nothing was funny anymore. James's luxury car empire wasn't just morally bankrupt. It was actually going bankrupt. He'd been taking money from one dealership to cover problems at another. Using credit to buy inventory he couldn't actually afford. Keeping the whole thing running on borrowed time and borrowed money. And Tiffany, his perfect influencer girlfriend who mocked me online? She had no idea. She thought she'd landed a wealthy man. She'd actually attached herself to a sinking ship. I did something then that I'm not entirely proud of, but I don't regret it either. I created a fake Instagram account and started following Tiffany. Just watching. Just being another faceless follower among thousands. She posted constantly about her amazing relationship, her luxury lifestyle, her expensive gifts. Finally found someone who knows my worth. One caption read, under a photo of her at a restaurant that probably cost $500 per person. When you stop settling, the universe provides, she wrote under another photo, showing off designer shoes. I left a comment on one post, playing the concerned stranger. Be careful. Not everything expensive is valuable. She blocked me within minutes. But I noticed she posted something vague later about fake people and jealousy. The seed was planted. Doubt, once it starts growing, spreads fast. On a Friday morning, exactly 8 days after I collapsed at work, I had James served with divorce papers. Victoria arranged it perfectly. The process server arrived at his main dealership location during his monthly meeting with his investors and business partners. Maximum impact. Minimum mercy. I'd already frozen our joint bank accounts that morning. Filed legal claims on the dealership property I co-owned. Submitted complaints to the Business Regulatory Board about financial irregularities. James called me 19 times in the first hour. I didn't answer once. He showed up at the house that evening, and I almost didn't let him in. But I wanted to see his face. I wanted to watch him panic and scramble and try to convince me I was crazy. So I opened the door. Sarah, what the hell is this? He was waving the divorce papers like they were some kind of mistake. His face was red. His voice was loud. You froze our accounts? You filed claims on my business? Have you lost your mind? I just looked at him. This man I'd loved for 5 years. This stranger wearing my husband's face. Your business. I said calmly. You mean our business. The one I co-signed for when banks wouldn't give you a loan. The one I backed with my credit and my income when you were just starting out. That's when he started with the manipulation. Telling me I was being emotional. Irrational. Having some kind of breakdown. That I was unstable. That I needed help. That everyone was worried about me. I let him talk himself in circles for about 5 minutes. Just stood there listening to him lie and gaslight and try to make me doubt what I knew was true. Then I pulled out my phone and played the recording. His voice, crystal clear, talking to Tiffany on the phone about their future together. Calling me stupid. Oblivious. Boring. Laughing about how easy it was to fool me. How I never questioned anything. How I just believed whatever he told me. And Tiffany laughing with him, making jokes about the wife, who was too blind to see what was right in front of her face. The color drained from James's face. He reached for my phone, but I stepped back. "Get out," I said quietly. "This is my house too. My lawyer will contact you about everything else." He tried to argue, but what could he say? I had evidence. I had legal claims. I had rights he'd forgotten I possessed. So he left. And I stood in that doorway watching him drive away in his expensive car that was probably leased on credit he couldn't afford. And I felt nothing. No love. No hate. Not even satisfaction. Just empty, like I'd finally put down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. The next week, everything fell apart for James, exactly the way Victoria said it would. A business reporter got an anonymous tip about financial problems at his dealerships. The regulatory board launched an investigation. Investors started pulling out, demanding audits, threatening lawsuits. It was all legitimate consequences for his own actions. Nothing I did except stop keeping his secrets. Tiffany saw the news. Of course she did. It was all over the local business section. Luxury car dealership owner under investigation for financial irregularities. Her meal ticket was evaporating in real time, and suddenly those designer bags and fancy brunches were coming out of her own pocket. She scrubbed her Instagram, deleted the live video where she'd mocked me, posted something vague about betrayal and learning hard lessons. Then she sent me a direct message. The message was long and rambling, full of apologies that weren't really apologies. She was sorry if I'd been hurt. She didn't know I'd see that video. She was going through a difficult time and said things she didn't mean. And then, buried in the middle of all that fake remorse, the real question. Did I know if James had any money in his name only? Any accounts I wasn't connected to? I screenshot the entire conversation and sent it to Victoria. Then I blocked her. I didn't know her explanations or forgiveness or inside information about her ex-boyfriend's crumbling empire. She made her choices. Now she could live with them. The divorce took 4 months to finalize. 4 months of lawyers and paperwork and dividing up a life we'd built together. Or at least, a life I thought we'd built together. Victoria was brilliant. She found money James had hidden in his brother's name. Property he'd bought using shell companies. Investments he'd tried to keep secret. In the end, I got the house. I got half the value of the original dealership. I got a settlement that would set me up comfortably for years if I was smart with it. James got what was left of his failing business empire and a reputation that was completely destroyed. The investigation found evidence of fraud. Not enough to send him to prison, but enough to make sure he'd never be trusted in business again. His remaining dealerships closed within 6 months. The luxury cars were sold off to pay debts. The designer suits ended up in a consignment shop somewhere. And Tiffany? She moved on to her next target. Some other man with money and status who could fund her lifestyle. I saw her Instagram a few months later. New boyfriend, new restaurants, same empty captions about worth and value and not settling. Some people never learn. They just keep repeating the same patterns, looking for the next person to use. But I learned. Oh, I learned so much. I learned that the person you love can become a stranger without you even noticing. I learned that sometimes the life you think you have is just a story you've been telling yourself. I learned that betrayal doesn't always announce itself with big dramatic moments. Sometimes it's quiet, gradual, a slow erosion of trust and respect until there's nothing left but resentment and lies. I also learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew. That I could stand up for myself even when my hands were shaking. That I could walk away from someone I loved when staying would destroy me. The anemia got better once I left. Turns out, living with constant stress and someone who makes you feel worthless takes a physical toll. My doctor said it's more common than people think. Your body keeps the score, even when your mind tries to ignore the signs. I started eating regular meals again, sleeping through the night, laughing without it feeling forced. Small things that I'd forgotten were normal. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I used my settlement money to do something I'd been dreaming about for years. I opened my own marketing consultancy. Small at first, just me and a couple of freelancers working from a tiny office downtown. But it was mine. Every decision, every client, every success belonged to me. It's been a year now since that day I woke up in the hospital. A year since I discovered that my husband was a stranger and my marriage was a lie. My consulting business is growing. I have 5 employees now, and we're working with clients across Canada. We specialize in helping small businesses build their brands authentically, without the fake perfection that dominates social media. It's satisfying work. Meaningful work. The kind that makes me excited to wake up in the morning instead of dreading another day of pretending everything is fine. I moved out of the house James and I shared. Too many memories there, too many ghosts. I found a small condo near the waterfront with big windows and natural light. It's half the size of our old house, but it feels twice as spacious because it's filled with things I actually chose. Books I love, art that speaks to me, furniture that's comfortable instead of impressive. I'm dating again, though I'm taking it slow. Learning what red flags look like. Learning to trust my instincts instead of making excuses for behavior that doesn't feel right. There's a man named David I've been seeing for a couple months. He's a teacher, kind and patient and honest in a way that still surprises me sometimes. He calls when he says he will. He shows up when he promises to. He asks how I'm feeling and actually listens to the answer. It's amazing how revolutionary basic decency feels when you've been living without it. Last week, I ran into James at a coffee shop downtown. He looked smaller somehow. Older. Like the weight of his choices had finally caught up with him. He was wearing a regular suit instead of the designer ones he used to favor. Driving a modest sedan instead of the luxury vehicles he used to collect. He saw me and hesitated, like he wasn't sure if he should come over. But then he did, trying on a smile that used to make my heart race. "Sarah," he said, "you look great. Really. I've been thinking about you." I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel anything except maybe a little bit sorry for him. Sorry that he'd thrown away something real for something fake. Sorry that he'd gambled everything on lies and lost. "That's nice," I said politely. "I hope things work out for you, James." He tried to keep talking, reminiscing about old times, hinting at mistakes and regrets, maybe hoping I'd offer him some kind of absolution or second chance. But I'd learned that my time was too valuable to waste on people who didn't value me. So I excused myself, walked back to my car, and drove to my office where real work and real relationships were waiting. And I swear, with every step away from him, I felt lighter. Here's what I want you to understand if you're watching this and you're going through something similar. If you're in a relationship where you feel small, where you're always making excuses for someone else's behavior, where you're exhausted from trying to hold things together alone, you deserve better. You deserve someone who shows up for you, who tells you the truth, who values your presence instead of taking it for granted. And if you're not getting that, it's not because you're not enough. It's because they're not capable of seeing your worth. Walking away is hard. Rebuilding is harder. But staying in something that's killing you slowly? That's the hardest thing of all. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect now. Some days are still difficult. Some nights I still feel lonely. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd confronted James earlier, if I'd paid attention to the signs I was ignoring. But then I remember that woman in the hospital bed with 43 missed calls and none from her husband. I remember how small I felt, how invisible. And then I look at my life now. My business, my home, my freedom to make choices based on what I want instead of what someone else needs. And I know I made the right decision. This is how a woman who collapsed at work became a woman who stood up for herself. This is how betrayal became the catalyst for the best decision I ever made. If this story touched your heart, if it resonated with something you're going through, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had a moment where you finally chose yourself? Where you walked away from something comfortable but wrong and towards something uncertain but true? Your story matters. Your voice matters. You matter. Subscribe if you want more real talk about life, love, and learning to value yourself. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, they'll test you when you're vulnerable. They'll underestimate you when you're down. But they'll never see you coming when you finally decide to rise. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And if you're in the middle of your own storm right now, please know this. You're stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and worthy of so much more than scraps of attention from someone who can't see your value. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's building a life so beautiful, so authentic, so true to who you really are that the person who betrayed you becomes completely irrelevant to your happiness. That's freedom. That's victory. That's rising again. And you can do it too. I believe in you.